Newshour Special Edition.
Good evening, namaskar. I am Shreya Upadhyaya. Ladies and gentlemen, all eyes are on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in China's Tianjin, where the global Eurasian leaders just pose for a family photo. Remember, this is happening after a 55-minute India-China bilateral, where Chinese President Xi Jinping told Prime Minister Narendra Modi that Beijing and New Delhi should choose friendship over rivalry and look beyond bilateral disputes amid geopolitical churns. From the outset, this meeting has been historic. This is Prime Minister's first China visit in 7 years, and finally the ties between the two superpowers are stabilizing after the border clashes in 2020. Bilateral relations and border issues were the core issues that were discussed in this 55-minute long meeting. In his opening remarks, Prime Minister Narendra Modi welcomed the restart of the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra and confirmed direct flights between India and China that will be restored soon. The Prime Minister also emphasized on mutual trust and sensitivity, saying that interests of close to 3 billion people are linked to this cooperation. He in fact also asserted that ties between India and China have been improving since their last meeting in Kazan, and that India is committed to taking this relationship forward. Meanwhile, President Xi Jinping echoed similar sentiments, calling both the countries a key player on the international level. In fact, the Chinese president stressed that it is important for both India and China to be friends and good neighbors, adding that the dragon and elephant must come together to preserve peace and prosperity in Asia and across the world.
शांति और स्थिरता का माहौल बना हुआ है। हमारे स्पेशल रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स के बीच बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट के संबंध में सहमति बनी। हमारे सहयोग से दोनों देशों के 2.8 बिलियन लोगों के बीच जुड़े हुए हैं। इससे पूरी मानवता के कल्याण का मार्ग भी प्रशस्त होगा।
They both agreed that the two countries were primarily focused on their domestic development goals, and in this they were partners rather than rivals. It was also an element of consensus between them that a stable and amicable relationship between India and China can be to the benefit of the 2.8 billion people who live in the two countries. There was originally a proposal from the Chinese side for Mr. Tsai to host a banquet for the Prime Minister on behalf of President Xi Jinping. This was meant as a special gesture to show the importance attached by China to the visit of the Prime Minister, which was taking place after a hiatus of nearly 7 years.
All right, let me welcome my guests on the show. Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, joins us. Professor Brahma Chilani, strategic affairs expert, joining us. Dr. John Harrison, homeland security expert, also joins us. Mr. Victor Gao, chair, Professor, Soochow University, China analyst, joins us, as well as Dr. Yukteswar Kumar, deputy chairman, Conservative Party, Bath, UK, joining us. Good evening, namaskar to all of you. Victor Gao, can I begin by asking you the Chinese perspective? We know the Indian perspective. We're optimistic. We're looking forward to strengthening this relationship with China, especially after the kind of very rough patch that the two countries have gone through. But as far as China is concerned and what it's looking to gain out of this relationship, what do you think it is and how is it going to move forward?
Thank you very much for having me. I think China did roll out the red carpet to welcome His Excellency Prime Minister Modi to visit China and attend the summit meeting of the SCO. I think Prime Minister Modi's visit, very important in itself, will really help reset China-Indian relations and restore our relations to more normalcy so that we can engage with each other for mutual benefit, despite of the territorial dispute, which does still bother us. However, I think, allow me to emphasize, China-India relations should not be one-dimensional. It's actually multidimensional, and we are faced with very similar challenges, especially in this anti-mankind tariff war launched by the United States against China, against India, against many other countries, and China decides to defend its own legitimate interest. And when we see India being really maximized in its pressure from the United States, we feel a lot of sympathy. I think the SCO summit provides an occasion so that these major countries in the world can really compare notes and come up with our concerted efforts to stand by our principles, to defend our sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as our legitimate right to develop. I think both China and India want to develop. We want to continue to develop. We have so many things to do for the betterment of the living standards of the Chinese people on the one hand, and of the Indian people on the other hand. So it is in our own interest if China and India can really engage with each other for mutual benefit, despite territorial dispute, which does still exist.
Okay. Dr. Harrison, these visuals that have come out of China today reflect more than 20 countries that are standing together. That's obviously, the Chinese side is trying to present a united stand as well. And so is the Russian side. Vladimir Putin standing there, reflecting that he's not isolated, an aim that perhaps America and European countries had. And therefore, my question is the U.S. concerned with this kind of a unity that has been seen not just between India and China, but the entire SCO grouping?
Well, I think we can sort of overstate the unity. At major diplomatic events, we always have the great pictures, which is fine. And I mean, I think that is certainly a victory for the Chinese, the Indian, and Russian governments, that they get a wonderful, superficial at least, pictures out of this. But I think the SCO as an organization has shown that it has a long way to go. It is certainly wonderful, an opportunity for nations to get together and meet. I don't think anybody would object to that. But there are still some very fundamental differences between and amongst the member states. So I think the rhetoric coming out of there is very positive, and there's no reason to downplay that. And I think certainly there would be elements of the Trump administration that would be concerned about it. There would also be other elements that would point out that the SCO has not really been able to check or support any of its members, particularly if you look at what happened earlier this summer, certainly in the Middle East. But I think it's a benefit certainly for India. It has shown that India has a long-term and very laudable reputation for having an independent foreign policy, and I think sending a message to the United States that you can't take India for granted certainly helps India. But I think the geostrategic interests of both India and China are still not perfectly aligned. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the rhetoric turns into reality. And that may not be quite as smooth as certainly the summit is presenting at the moment. Okay.
So far, over 2 decades of India-US relationship, we did think that perhaps those who are not natural partners have now sort of got some sort of convergence in interests, but that clearly has gone for a toss under the Trump administration. So when you say that India and China have their differences, in diplomacy, it's obviously the fact that you're moving ahead, you iron out those differences, or at least you sort of compromise or adjust with them and then move forward to the next step. But Ambassador Sajjanhar, as far as the India-China relationship is concerned, what Dr. Harrison said, that there are differences, convergences are less, perhaps divergences are more, and therefore, how do you see this relationship moving forward from here on?
Yeah, thank you very much, Shreya, for having me. Yes, you're right. I think there are differences, and no one will try to sort of, push them under the carpet. But both the sides have decided, you would recall 2017 on the sidelines of the Astana SCO summit, they said the differences should not become disputes. And this was again reiterated today, that, that was the Astana consensus, that we should not allow differences to become disputes. So that will be the intention. Now, basically, I do understand, that there are huge problems. Mr. Victor Gao has talked about the boundary question. Boundary question is a very serious question, but that is not the only question. There are many other issues, for instance, as far as the support to Pakistan is concerned in terms of, protecting its terrorists. You would recall that even a person of the nature, who well-known terrorist like Masood Azhar, we started to try and put him in the international list of designated terrorists in 2009, and China kept on putting vetoes and technical holds, etc. There is a huge, in addition to this, support to Pakistan, which we saw also during the Operation Sindoor. So this is something, the relationship is with Pakistan is a very strong one, and we know that Pakistan uses terrorism as an instrument of its foreign policy against India. So what is China going to be doing about that? Yeah. As far as trade is concerned, there's a huge trade imbalance between the two countries. Last year it was 100 billion trade deficit between India and China, and so again there are all these barriers to trade, non-conventional barriers to trade, not tariffs but others, and as a result of which Indian exports are not able to find a market. Now there might be an argument that we need to become we need to make more items which the Chinese market needs. But India is exporting to more than 150 countries, more than $400 billion worth of goods. To China, it is only, last year it was only $12 billion. So definitely India can export more if these non-tariff barriers are removed. There are many others, for instance, this construction of the dam on in Tibet that is being done. No hydrographical data is being provided to India. So the point I would make is large number of differences. In all of them, the ball is very much in China's court. It is very good to say, that we are partners, not rivals, and of course for the Asian century both the elephant and the dragon have to work together. I don't think any truer words could have been said, but then it will really depend upon whether China is willing to walk the talk. And I think we are putting a lot of expectation and hope in that. But of course we'll be ready to see that if things don't work out that way, that we are there to protect our interests. The last point I'll make is that some people are saying this is a troubled time, the whole international situation is in a flux, in a turmoil, and that's why these countries are coming together. It is very clear from the Indian readout that what is happening between India and China should not be seen from the lens of a third country. No one should think that it is because India has this problem of the tariff issue with the United States that it is moving towards China. No, India is determining its actions on the basis of what its interests are.
Fair point, Ambassador Sajjanha, that you're making, that there are countries which have standalone separate relationships and we shouldn't be mixing the two. But Professor Brahmachilani, can we do that in international relations at this time where there are geopolitical challenges, when Donald Trump has brought in a geopolitical point in, giving the reason why he's imposing secondary tariffs against India? It wasn't about trade. He's made it about a geopolitical situation. And therefore, these things are now overlapping. Can we still see them as separate relationships?
India as an independent power is a member of rival geopolitical groupings. It's a member of the US-led Quad, it's a member of the China-dominated SCO, it's a member of BRICS. So what India is doing is something that successive governments in New Delhi have done. And today's meeting between Xi Jinping and Modi was also about geopolitical signaling that dependence on Washington is not India's only option. But you're right to ask the larger question about of the realignment that's happening globally, geopolitically. And we're seeing some very ominous trends. It's, for example, we're seeing the international geopolitical realignment occurring against a backdrop of economic fragmentation. Globalization, once seen as irreversible, has stalled and may even be going into reverse. Protectionist policies are proliferating, and Trump is only one example of such protectionist policies. In fact, almost the entire Western bloc today has embraced protectionist or nationalist economic policies. Washington has turned to tariff subsidies and secondary sanctions to advance its geopolitical ends, and India is one example of how these new instruments are being employed for geopolitical ends. Beijing, for its part, is promoting yuan-based settlement mechanisms and alternative supply chains while holding gold. It's holding gold, buying gold, even mining gold in other countries, sometimes illegally, to insulate itself from Western financial pressure. And what is emerging is not a single global marketplace, but a patchwork of rival trading and financial blocs. And I think the danger now is that the world today is at risk of splitting into rival geopolitical and economic blocs. If that were to happen, it will threaten not just global prosperity, but also global peace, because a similar trend happened in the 1930s. It contributed eventually to World War II, when trade moved from being multilateral to becoming trade within geopolitical blocs.
Yeah.
That fueled tension. So today, we are seeing tectonic shifts in global power. And in that context, I think both the effort on the part of India and China to mend their relations, as well as the holding of the SCO summit, which will be followed immediately by the massive military parade by China in Beijing, which will include a who's who of the world's strongmen. I think these developments are symbolically very important.
And therefore, Dr. Yukteswar Kumar, since there's a lot of talk about the new world order and how there are tectonic shifts in the global order, how do you see this moving forward? Because obviously this grouping has aimed at sending out a very strategic, crucial message to the West. And therefore, how do you see this moving ahead, considering, like Professor Chelani said, that there are Cold War-like blocs that are, if not made completely and sharply, they are sort of, moving towards that?
Thank you. There is a saying in Chinese, 百闻不如一见. So I am sitting right in Tianjin and looking at this. And this SCO meeting is indeed a very, very important meeting because unlike NATO, it is not a military alliance. Unlike the EU, it is also not about the economic union. It is a platform where competing powers could still talk. And as Deng Xiaoping once said, cross the river by filling the stone. In Chinese we say, 摸着石头过河. So this SCO is exactly that, an experiment in gradual, pragmatic and cooperation in the fractured world, as my respected Professor Brahmachelani just said. And that's why this is very, very important, and the photographs and the meetings which are evolving from where I'm sitting here from Tianjin are really encouraging, because it is important that over 2.8 billion people's interest is protected. India and China have been the two continuous civilization, and this matter was also raised today.
Okay.
There have been no any other two, apart from the other two civilizations we know of, Egypt and Mesopotamia, they were broken civilizations, they were hurdles. But India and China, in the last 2,500 years of history, we could see that till 1959, they were very, very good partner. And if you leave in, if anybody remembers 1950s, then we were brothers. So we should and we could be partners. Of course, India has to walk and tread the path very carefully, and we should not be sunk like what happened in 1960s. So,
yes, absolutely. So, that is something that is crucial to note. But Mr. Victor Gao, there are, of course, differences, and both sides acknowledge it. Ambassador Sajanhar made the point of Pakistan and how we have concerns here of how terror emanates against India and Indians from Pakistan. Simultaneously, of course, China shares a close relationship with that country, and therefore, how do you think both sides can weed out these kind of differences that are very deep-seated and very serious concerns on the Indian side?
Well, indeed, there are these deep-seated problems, which I do acknowledge. On the other hand, I personally believe what the Indian subcontinent needs is really an attempt to reach an overarching framework of peace and stability between India and Pakistan on the one hand, and between China and India on the other hand. I think if we do not make that effort for lasting peace in the Indian subcontinent, then we may always be held hostage by one flaring up of geopolitical rivalry in one spot, another territorial dispute on the other hand, for example, and all the potentials for this subcontinental cooperation will be very much tempered. Now, allow me also to emphasize one point. SCO is not against the United States. SCO is not against the Western countries. SCO is very open-ended, and it wants to cooperate with the United States. It wants to cooperate with West as a whole. However, if the United States manhandles countries like India or China, then it gives us reason to pause and to think, really, what is going on? Why should any country in the world hold a gun at our head, demanding our ultimatum, for example, demanding our surrender? How can any country insult our dignity, for example, and try to dismiss us as if our matters are not that consequential? Only what they say is consequential. No, that is not a world we want to really live in. We want to live in a world where we will be treated as equals. We are equal between China and India. We are both equal with the United States. That is a better world, I think. So we are not talking about, within the SCO framework, we conspire against the US or against the West, etc. No, we want to work with every country. And it's encouraging that countries like Turkey, for example, a NATO member, is very much interested in talking to SCO, or even try to become a member. They want to become a member of BRICS, for example. All this indicates that SCO does have its own vitality. It is on the upswing rise, and going forward, I think SCO may gain more momentum and will become a louder voice, more eloquent voice in the world, especially when there are building up tensions, for example, and there is a specter that the world is going to fragment, for example, and peace may give way to a war, and we really need to think twice about who is our real enemy. I don't think any member within the SCO framework should be enemy with each other. We do have problems, or we can solve these problems in amity with each other.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Harrison, what Mr. Gao is saying is a sentiment that several countries across the world feel, particularly this part of the world, that why are we being bullied when that part of the world is doing the same thing, or, reflecting double standards or hypocrisy on very many issues. And that is why it raises the concern again of the rebalancing of the world order. Why should one country, case in point, of course, the latest that we are seeing from the Donald Trump administration, be bullying others into taking that country's stand when we have our own strategic autonomy?
Correct. And I don't think anybody should be looking at an international organization as necessarily a conspiracy against anyone else. So I would certainly agree with that. And I'm not sure that certainly Europe or North America necessarily sees that. I think there is a question that sort of how does not only the SCO, but so many of the other international organizations that emerged after the Second World War and that have been part of global management for good and for ill, how those fit into the new system. And I think that's where the concern is, that there's a lot of confusion and sort of a lack of clarity. And unfortunately, there are underlying tectonic shifts, as has been mentioned by several of the guests, that the Trump administration is at the very least accelerating. And that makes for a very unnerving global situation, so that you've got actors, both states and non-state actors, that have potential to disrupt and have an outsized influence, on global politics. So in and of itself, there is nothing wrong with nations talking. I mean, the international relations scholar in me says it is wonderful when nations talk. The question always is what do these talks mean, and how do you balance a world that, again, rightfully or wrongfully so, the Trump administration has certainly projected that has been disadvantageous to the United States. Many in Europe say the system has been disadvantageous to them and many of their constituents. So I think there are a lot of very fundamental questions going on, and the more talk and the more answers that can come, and the more avenues that we can reach peaceful answers are quite beneficial. But it's just not clear yet that where any of these are going, and certainly geopolitical rivalries are returning. The age of terrorism dominating the conversation seems to have faded back to a more standard geopolitical competition, at the very least. And I wouldn't want to go so far as to say conflict. And that in this transition, there's a lot of disquiet. And certainly the more opportunities countries have to iron those out and find peaceful pathways forward, the more beneficial that is.
Okay. Ambassador Sajjanhar, there is, of course, a lot of conversation about how there's been a trust deficit between India and China. And now, of course, we have that sentiment with America as well under Donald Trump. But as far as India is concerned, can I understand from you who we would prefer? Would we prefer an outspoken, bizarre, unpredictable Donald Trump and the U.S. versus a country like China, where we have had an experience where they've said something and done something completely different?
Yeah, excellent question, Shreya. I think in this, our policy of multi-alignment, we would like to work with both of them. And, I think Mr. Trump is really seen as an aberration. Everyone in the world, including India, had thought that Trump 2.0 would be a linear extrapolation of Trump 1.0. That has not been the case. And I think all these, tariffs that he has been imposing on the world, these chickens will come home to roost very soon in terms of increased inflation, in terms of lessening productivity, in terms of increasing unemployment. And I think that will be a reality check as far as Mr. Trump is concerned. Let's also put it this way. America is not Trump. Trump is one part, and there is the whole American bureaucracy. We know that there are other elements of our bilateral relationship with America which are proceeding. We just had this intersessional meeting of senior officials of the two countries in the area of 2+2. Yeah. There is a huge universe available to us beyond trade and tariffs. There is technology that is moving. We have a huge diaspora. There is a huge market, both for Indian products as well as for American products in India. There is, this collaboration as far as counterterrorism is concerned, geopolitics is concerned. So there is a huge vast area where we can collaborate. As far as China is concerned, there is this huge huge trust deficit with China. And as I said, the ball is very much in China's court on all these fronts as to what it can really do to see, not exactly assuage India's feelings, but see how it can send out the right message that it is, it doesn't bode ill as far as India is concerned. If you permit, I'll just make one or two comments, to what I think the earlier speakers had said. It was mentioned India-Pakistan should resolve the differences. India-China should resolve.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into details. India-Pakistan, we know that if Pakistan stopped using terrorism, I think we would really be able to come to a settlement very, very quickly. India-China, there are other issues that we have been discussing. But as far as SCO is concerned, SCO has no mandate as far as dealing with bilateral issues is concerned. And so, SCO does not really have a role to play. The second point I would like to make is that, SCO came onto the scene in 2001. 24 years have elapsed. SCO has really nothing much to show in terms of what it has been able to achieve. It came as in terms of fighting terrorism, extremism, etc. But when you see the issue in Afghanistan, the conflict that took place between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, nowhere SCO was conspicuous by its absence, although all these countries are members of SCO. It really was not able to play a role, and the reason for that is that there is not only a lack of trust between India and China, but amongst the other countries also. There is no cohesiveness, there is very little synergy as far as these countries are concerned.
Okay.
Shreya.
Professor Chelani, since Ambassador Sajjanhar talked about, the relevance and the achievable targets of the SCO, I also want to talk about BRICS and Quad, something that has been talked about a lot with the SCO summit happening, and reports suggesting that Donald Trump will not be attending the Quad summit. The relevance of these groupings vis-a-vis the kind of geopolitical challenges that India is facing at the moment, what do you think? Because BRICS is something that, clearly ruffles a lot of feathers, specifically in the U.S.
First, there is no decision on when to hold the Quad, let alone set a date. So the New York Times report that Trump has decided not to attend the Quad summit is premature, because he can only decide when, once there's agreement on holding a Quad on a specific date. And that date can only be agreed upon jointly by all the four member states of the Quad. The Quad, it was Trump in the first term who resurrected the Quad and gave it a defining agenda. It was Trump who in his first term, in his very first year, unveiled America's free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. The concept of free and open Indo-Pacific was authored by former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. For the first time in living memory, U.S. foreign policy adopted a foreign authored concept as its defining doctrine. And even more interesting, that Trump, in his Indo-Pacific strategy, gave India pride of place. India was central to his Indo-Pacific strategy. In fact, in Trump's first term, U.S.-India relations flourished like they had never before under any U.S. president. That was the golden era of U.S.-Indian relations. Now imagine Trump comes back and he's undermining that very relationship. It's mind-boggling what Trump is doing. The thing is that Trump has turned disruption into his governing creed, into his doctrine. And he's doing great harm to America's own long-term interests. He's unwittingly providing the very shock therapy the international system needs to break free from U.S. dominance. When history is written, history will not be kind to Trump, because he has undermined America's alliances and partnerships. He has diminished U.S. credibility. He is hastening America's relative decline and accelerating the shift toward a truly multipolar world. So in that context, the SCO is becoming important, but even more so, BRICS, because Trump is harping on BRICS. Until Trump realized that BRICS was a threat, most analysts in the world were wondering, what's happened to BRICS? Why is BRICS becoming so anemic, so unable to deliver? So suddenly, because of Trump's perceived threat from BRICS, BRICS is becoming a monster. Actually, just as the ASEO lacks cohesion and clarity of objectives, so does BRICS. India and Brazil in BRICS have a different agenda. They are the neutral states. They're trying to moderate the efforts by China and Russia to create to develop an anti-Western orientation for BRICS. India and Brazil, but today India and Brazil, the moderating voices in BRICS, are the targets of Trump's tariff war. Both Brazil and India are facing 50% tariff on their exports to the US. So it really shows how Trump lacks grand strategy in his second term. He's being guided by narrow commercial considerations.
And we'll have to see how this moves forward. We have that significant meeting tomorrow between India's Prime Minister and the Russian President. Before that, of course, the Ukrainian President had called up Prime Minister Modi to urge him for, peace and ending the war. Let's wait and watch how this entire, relationship unfolds. But at the moment, I will wrap it up here. Thank you very much to all of you gentlemen, Victor Gao, Dr. Harrison, Dr. Kumar, Professor Chilani, as well as Ambassador Sajjanha. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us on Times Now and sharing your perspective.
The News Hour Special Edition.